discussion, let's go down and see who we have here with us today, starting all the way over there on the right. Gavin.
Hi, I'm Gavin Price, the Studio Director and Creative Director at Playtonic.
I'm Daly, I'm Engagement Director at Playtonic.
Hi, I'm Mark Stevenson, I'm one of the artists working at Playtonic.
Hello, I'm Simon Gurgis and I'm Software Director at Playtonic.
So I'm sitting next to the right guy here, the Software Director. But first we should go back. So obviously, you guys are familiar with the original Yooka-Laylee and Banjo-Kazooie as well, which was the game that basically inspired that original one. But this one is a very different game. This is more Donkey Kong Country, if you will, a 2D side-scroller game. But I guess I'm curious for these guys, what was it that inspired you to go in this direction and essentially abandon, temporarily at least, the full 3D sort of exploration game and go back to a side-scroller?
Well, we just always wanted to attack different genres and keep everyone on their toes as to what we could be doing next. And during the development of the first game, we trialled seeing if we could get some 2D stages into the first game. We just didn't have enough time to get it into the quality we wanted to do. But it really got us thinking and talking about, wow, doing a game in 2D with these characters, did they have the right moveset, how could we do something different? We all just got really excited and said, right, this is great, gives us something to think about and roll on to straight away. And that's how we ended up doing it, really.
Okay, and so another thing that's about this game that I found interesting is you guys did stick with Unity. The original Yooka-Laylee was planned for that. Who knows why Unity was selected in the first place? I'm always curious. As a developer, how do you decide which technology you want to go with to begin with for your very first project?
I think before the Kickstarter, before we were just 6 guys in an office, and we were like, what's free? We've got no money, we've got nothing. How are we going to get a game done? But at the time, we were inspired by a lot of the other games being made in Unity. So we just kind of checked out what was being achieved elsewhere, and we saw that there was a lot of good fits, and just being inspired by what other people were doing at the time.
Unity is also a really good engine if you want to iterate quickly, if you want the designers and artists to be hands-on. It just made perfect sense for us at the time. And there's not an awful lot of choice out there at the time as well, so yeah, Unity was perfect.
I guess this time though, the platforms were decided on early on. When the original was pitched, the Wii U was still around, and it was very early in this generation, where for this one of the key choices made early on that you mentioned is targeting the Switch as sort of the base platform. Can you talk about how you sort of went about doing this, essentially focusing on that one platform and ensuring that you were going to get stable performance across the whole run of consoles?
Yeah, so Switch is obviously the weakest platform overall that we've released, so it just makes perfect sense to target Switch first. I think we finished the first game with only about 4 Switch consoles, dev kits, so the first thing we did was to order more dev kits so more people could be running on it from very early on. We got the Switch version up and running right at the beginning of the development cycle, and we just made sure that we tried to maintain the performance targets on Switch in the hope that we would have far less work to do on the other platforms.
And I'd say we were pleasantly surprised that the Switch port of the first game was the last one we did. So it was the closest in time to the development of the second game. We were really, really pleasantly surprised actually with how well the first game performed on Switch. And we always anticipated that the second game we could really up the bar on quality across all the consoles as well.
A little story. I made it probably what was rather a bold claim very early on in development, which was, we've just shipped Yooka a solid 30 on Switch. That means we should be able to make a side-on game or top-down game run at 60 very easily. And I'm not sure whether that was more a silly thing to say, or maybe me saying that possibly made some of the artists well, I mean, we had some levels with hundreds of lights in, and maybe by me saying that, it's probably part of both, but partly by me saying that, I think we made it more difficult for ourselves. So, yeah.
So how do you approach things like the art mark, and when designing a game for 60 frames per second target across every machine versus going for 30, how does it affect the art pipeline from your perspective? Does it have much of an impact?
So there's a lot of stuff we learned with doing the first one. In terms of things you need to do in Unity to get the performance you want and how you like combine models together and stuff. So we hit the ground running already with stuff that we'd learned from the previous thing. Obviously with a 2D platformer, the camera isn't under the player's control, so that helps enormously as well, you know, because you can much more easily test performance at various points throughout a level, whereas in a 3D platformer, you have no idea where the camera's going to be looking at any point in time. So yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of kind of keep testing on Switch really, and profiling and working out what's causing you problems, and it's just a constant learning process really.
Something that we realised early on was because of the amount of levels we had to, we couldn't rely on, say, one engineer to just profile all of the levels and try and find out what was struggling. So one thing we did very early on was try and empower the artists to be able to profile in-game. So we run, rather than, force them to use the performance analysis tools that are actually quite complicated for anyone. We made a system whereby they could run their game, run their levels on Switch, run some performance analysis within the level, and then it would give a best guess as to what was causing any performance problems. So if it was CPU bound, then immediately they would maybe come my way, but if it was GPU bound, then it would be more down to them to try and solve.
That's cool. One more technical thing though I am curious about. One of the interesting things I noticed is the game has very heavy with loading on the front end, but once you get into the game, it's pretty quick. Maybe you could explain to everybody sort of the approach you take to solving problems like that to ensure a smooth experience and why you have such a long loading screen from the beginning.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up so we can try and defend our position a bit on this. Early on, we obviously wanted the player to have the shortest loading time as possible whilst playing the game. And we made a decision that having the entire overworld in memory all the time was going to be beneficial for that, in that they can just jump in and out of 2D levels actually rather quickly, and actually when you finish a 2D level there is absolutely no load at all. You can go straight back into the overworld and it's there. The alternative to having a shorter loading time up front is to maybe only load a part of the overworld and then have more loading whilst you're on the overworld. So overall, I feel that we made the right decision there, and all you do is you pay for that one load when you first boot the game, especially nowadays with where people can just put their console to sleep and they don't even need to turn the game off. I think we made the right decision there.
Okay, so let's talk more about the game itself and sort of some of the inspirations. So I know at least, Mark, you've worked on some of the old Donkey Kong Country games. You worked on what, DKC 1 through 3, right? And then 64?
Yeah, that's correct.
So what kind of, is this the first time you've returned to a 2D platform game, like as a big project since then, or?
Yeah, this will be my first 2D platform since Donkey Kong Country 3, which was about 96. Yeah, I mean, I guess me and the other guys, we just kind of do what we do with the art. You know, we've always had this kind of way we approach characters and stuff, how we design them. Always like to make everything really colourful and fun and bright.
And you didn't, I assume you really wanted to bring back Lanky Kong, but obviously that's not possible as this is not a Donkey Kong Country game. Did you come up with sort of more of an equivalent for this game at any point? And
no, not really. I mean, I didn't do a massive amount of the characters on this game. I had a lot more time on the UI and the VFX. I've got 1 million in there that's he's a water one. He's got little flippers on and a little life ring and goggles. I think that's like kind of some of the mentality we brought across, you know, from the country games. You'd see like the Kremlins and stuff. Like they'd always have kind of partly dressed up and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm just always looking, like with the Kongs, just looking for ways to make the characters unique and interesting and memorable.
all right, so Gavin, how about how much did you guys look back at the original games and sort of the DKC legacy? Because I feel like there's a lot of elements there, specifically with the momentum and the rolling, but then there's things that are different, obviously. There's the overworld that's totally different. There's no run button, which is also different. I mean, how do you decide sort of like to create something that's a spiritual successor to a popular game, but also find its own niche and sort of different vision?
So internally, surprisingly maybe, we consciously try to avoid doing a spiritual successor to Donkey Kong Country. We love it, and there's always going to be some natural kind of evolution or overlap of the themes that people who worked on the original Donkey Kong Country are very familiar with and very fond of. So they do appear throughout the game, but we were always trying to push ourselves for our second game to move away from a spiritual successor tag and really inject our own personality and thoughts into it. And that's where ideas built around the overworld, the open world structure in terms of you can go and take on the final impossible lair right from the start of the game. Lots of all the things unique in it, and just a strong conscious decision to not be like Donkey Kong Country. Particularly because Retro have done some amazing Donkey Kong Country games as well more recently. And for us, you know, we're probably working on a budget closer to their cinematics budget for our entire game. So it's important for us to put a bit more of our own personality and own unique selling points into the game to help it stand out on its own 2 feet.
All right, so then, Ellie, you came in on the project a bit later, but you've taken a lot of different roles over there. How does it feel coming into sort of a studio with such a pedigree now? And, you know, a lot of these guys have been doing this stuff for a while, very well. How was it first coming into the studio and taking charge of those roles, and maybe explain some of the things that you did on the project as well?
Well, yeah, it was a little bit terrifying at first. I was kind of afraid to go to the end of the office where all the artists sit, like Steve Mills and Mom. Like I was too shy to speak to them. It took me a while, but no, it was great. I came in and basically handled everything comms, so it's like community, marketing, PR, and a few other little bits. And I grew up being a huge fan of Donkey Kong Country, obviously, so I was really excited when I saw the project, and I was excited to get behind that and do my thing.
I think Laylee did a great job for us. She was able to talk to us as we were developing the game from the perspective of someone who we were building this game for. And it was invaluable, really great.
Another thing that changed from the project then is this one was not kickstarted. So obviously the original game was a Kickstarter project. How did you make the decision to move away from that model, and how has it been for you in comparison? If you could compare and contrast the Kickstarter experience with the non-Kickstarter experience.
We ummed and ahed about it for about 3 minutes at the start of the project and decided, you know what, Kickstarter's got a lot of pros and it's got some cons, and where we were as a studio and where crowdfunding was throughout the industry at that point in time, we just thought ultimately we'll make a better game if we can just work in secret, get our heads down and just put everything into it and not have to worry about managing the campaign on the outside of that, which, although necessary for the first game, and I wouldn't change anything, it definitely gave us a lot of extra overheads to do that distracted us from just core game development. We really are just a bunch of guys and girls who just want to get on and just make games. We like to try and be good at that, and we don't like to try and be bad at other things. So the more we focus on what we're good at, the more confident we are that we're going to deliver a game that hits the quality bar we want.
Cool. Let's move back a little bit to the technical stuff then. This was, so the first project was multi-platform, but you guys initially did the PC version and then an in-house Switch port. But the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One games were handled more by Team 17. Whereas this time, you developed all versions in-house, which is quite an undertaking, especially for a small studio. How did you find this? How was your experience in doing massively multi-platform gaming with a relatively small team?
Yeah, I agree. Actually, to begin with, we did question whether we were going to be capable, because obviously it is a lot more work for us. But actually, it seemed to come together really well. Jens was always trying to keep the PlayStation and Xbox versions running throughout development, and Of course, by targeting Switch first, it does aid the development on Xbox and PlayStation. But actually, we were really pleased with how it all came together at the end, especially for a sim ship. I guess we could say we surprised ourselves a little bit. But yeah, we're really pleased we managed to do it.
Can you talk about the most frustrating bugs you encountered during development? The ones that had you banging your head on the desk? Anyone?
Bugs-wise, again, we kind of just learned so much from the first game that we're able to put in under the hood on this game. And the bug and QA process went a lot smoother too. There was some crazy stuff in there and some right last-minute stuff that you just think, oh, that's horrible. But we're actually in this period right now where the game's out, it's being played, and it's hit a chord with speedrunners. And we're seeing them doing some crazy stuff, crazy bugs. And we're not going to really try and fix those bugs. We want to leave those bugs in. They're great, they're creative, and people are finding really fun ways of navigating around the game and the systems and trousers paywalls, which he won't be happy about if he's not getting paid. But we kind of embrace that side of it. Serious bugs, we're right on top of them from the start. Simon is a big taskmaster. And if he saw the frame counter on the CPU or the GPU going down, he was on us. And we were all having to, before we check in, run Simon's tests and make sure we were passing. And if we didn't, we were getting cake fines. And, you know, we were just getting bigger and bigger throughout development. We thought, no, we best start doing this right now, just for our own health.
Yeah, we did actually have what we call validation tests. Sounds really boring, but a load of tests that everyone had to run before they can submit any work. We feel that probably caught the majority of bugs very early on. But overall, I would say, and it probably goes for most games, any physics bugs are always the worst to have to deal with, because a lot of them only happen 1 in a million times. You'd get a video of the player just flying off into the air, and you just think, how does that even happen? And you can't reproduce it. You just have to try and guess why it may have happened, and then maybe try and work around it. I'd say the team probably struggled with physics bugs the most.
Another thing I was wondering about, so you guys implemented dynamic resolution on Xbox One X specifically. How did you decide to implement that on one machine only versus the others, and what led to that decision to implement it in the first place? What kind of results were you seeing that said, hey, we need to figure this out? And was it something that you wrote in-house, or was that a feature available to other Unity developers?
So Unity actually do provide a tool to aid dynamic resolution themselves. On the version of Unity we shipped, it was only supported on Switch and Xbox. But we actually really wanted to get it to work. Well, we did get it to work on Switch, and it was fine. But actually, when we looked at the results, we felt that a scaled down image was actually filtered in a way that we weren't entirely happy with, and actually just the native lower resolution looked better. So that was just a decision that we had to make. Whereas with Xbox One X, we don't get that problem, because obviously it's much higher resolution. You don't really notice it. So it actually worked really well for the Xbox One X.
Very cool, very cool. All right, so how about the music, the soundtrack? You guys didn't work on this, but obviously, how did you come up with this sort of shift in tone? Because it's very different from what was done in the original Yooka-Laylee, which was much more upbeat, sort of a more like positive sound, where this is a bit more deeper, darker sounds instead. Like, how do you go about determining the vibe from the music and choosing the right composers for the job?
Yeah, well, we're really lucky in that regard that we have Grant Kirkhope and David Wise on tap almost. Anytime we want to call them up, no matter where they are in the world, they're always willing to take our call. And very early on, when we showed them the early screens of the game, they just got it straight away. You know, they've worked with us on so many games in our past as well. It was very easy and natural for them to just see what we're up to, get a handle on it. And we really, more so with Dave Wise, we really wanted Dave, and he lives near the studio, to come in as often as possible and kind of start tutoring and guiding our in-house composers as well into how to create in his style. And that was just so because we wanted to get so many more music tracks in than we could with the first game. And we kept saying, right, what if we've got this much time, does every level have a unique track, or does it share a track across state changes? And if those guys could write more music, then we could do more interesting things with the state changes and even do things like change environmental effects, time of day on those levels as well. And that enabled them to do even more contrasting styles of music throughout the game and really inject not only a massive amount of music, but a lot of different takes on the style of platforming. That if you say 2D platformers coming out, it's got Dave Wise on the soundtrack, you kind of know what to expect and what you hope it's going to be. And so we were really pleased by having 4 composers on the game. We just got so much more music in there than we ever did before. And the soundtrack is now available on Bandcamp.
That's great. One more technical thing on the music actually is I noticed you do some of the dynamic interweaving of tracks. Like if you dive into the water, it's the same song, but it's sort of like an underwater version. How do you handle that from the back end side?
Yeah, to be honest, it's mostly handled from the audio team themselves. They maybe ask us to provide some kind of trigger for them to say, oh, the player has now entered water, but then they would obviously do all, compose their version of it or filter it in a way that I'm actually not entirely sure if it's filtered or it's a different track, is it?
It's mostly handled. We use Wise, and the audio guys can't stop praising Wise.
Yeah.
Wise is just a fantastic tool for them to work with. And even since shipping, as we start doing experiments on what we're doing next, those guys find even more ways to find interactivity and playfulness with the music and sound effects based on what's going to be happening in the world and what the player's getting up to. So hopefully you'll see us evolve and improve in that going forward.
Yeah, they wanted to do even more, didn't they? And it was like they had some brilliant ideas, and I feel like in the future you'll see much more from them as well.
Very cool. And Daly, another one for you. So can you talk about, so you did a lot of like marketing stuff and sort of like getting the word out on the game, right? So how do you handle something where it very much is, to me at least, feels like a spiritual kind of follow-up to DKC. It is an original thing, of course, but how do you message something like that? Because when you invoke something like that, obviously you get more attention from fans, but you can't really do that because it's still its own thing. I'm curious how you work with that and find the right balance.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one to answer because it's quite a broad thing to go into. But I looked at it and I kind of, because I looked at it from the offset, so I talked about what I thought I would want to hear as a Donkey Kong Country fan. So like obviously we just touched on music. I knew that the music was going to be like a key part of this game that people really latch onto. So when we were leading up to launch, like I released some of the tracks early to get people excited, because they hear the music, they're gonna get a feel of the vibe that we were going for. And I think kind of emphasizing the different, the kind of style of gameplay. Like it's super quick platforming, but also there's stuff to collect, and also we have this, sprawling overworld, so you can have a kind of a 3D adventure in between that. So it was a lot to communicate because there's lots of elements as well, like the tonics that change how things look, your skin that can change how the gameplay is. So it was complicated, but I think I got there in the end.
All right, so we have about 10 minutes left, so I think we might want to go ahead and turn it over to some Q&As. You guys good with that? We'll get out the microphone here. So if anybody wants to ask any questions, come on up. It's all good.
A couple of questions of Yooka-Laylee. Can we expect any DLC or updates or something coming to the game?
It's something that we've been conscious of before finishing the game. What do we want to do? What elements, rather than just add more of what's there, what elements could add a new string to the game's bow? And I'm not going to spoil anything right now, but yeah, it's been thought about and talked about heavily in the studio, and we want to bring something to fruition, as well as, I hate to jump back to the first game as well, but we know there's stuff there still to do as well, and we haven't forgot about it. We're just trying to come up with surprising and interesting ways to make it really, really cool and interesting.
Fantastic. Talking about the first game, now obviously that's inspired by Banjo-Kazooie and that kind of platformer games, and this one with Donkey Kong Country. Do you have perhaps a spiritual successor to Diddy Kong Racing, for example? Someone has to ask, sorry.
So I literally went into setting up Playtonic with the intention of the first game would be a karting game, And Grant Kirkhope talked me out of it and said, no, you've got to go 3D platformer. And I think it's something a lot of us in the office have a massive passion for, that genre. And we, 5 o'clock is called Carter Clock, and we go down to the end of the office and make up lots of new swear words as we play Mario Kart 8. So I couldn't and wouldn't dare commit to it and say we're 100% going to do something like that, but there is a massive amount of passion to go and do something like that.
Fantastic. And how's the reception been for Yooka-Laylee and Impossible Lair in contrast to the first game, Yooka-Laylee? Anyone at all?
I'll start. So the first game, we saw that we were very much split in the audience on whether they enjoyed it or not. This time around, it's been overwhelmingly positive, which is fantastic. And we just want to thank everybody, whether they bought the first game, supported us on the second game, for that support, because good or bad, whatever we do in the future, and it's difficult to move from genre to genre, you can guarantee that you're going to keep hitting a quality bar when you're not just doing a sequel after a sequel, and you can quickly refine. It makes our lives more difficult, but we're committed to hitting high quality bars for ourselves as we move forwards. And every time we receive great feedback and support, it really energizes a team like us. We're very small, we're independent, we're just this little developer in Burton-on-Trent, which isn't well known for having lots of natural business support or video game dev support going on in the area. But yeah, it's been great to see the reaction this time around, and long may it continue.
Okay, well, a little off topic now. Daily, how's your mum?
She's doing well, thank you.
Fantastic. Also, I just want to say, thank you guys for the games that you create. I've grown up with Banjo-Kazooie and Donkey Kong. In fact, my sister is actually sitting over there. She made me a birthday cake early with Banjo-Kazooie, which I absolutely love. And I should have brought a couple of slices if I'd known you guys were here, but never mind. Maybe next time.
Let us know when your birthday is.
Thank you.
We'll tie in.
Thank you. November 19th.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much, everybody. I think that's gonna do it for this panel today. So, firstly, big thanks to all you guys for coming on down, and thank you guys for coming. And that was the first panel then. There's plenty more panels happening here at EGX, including